And can I invite Scott, Simon, and Joe to open up your videos, and we'll do some Q&A. We've got a good chunky set of questions to get through. So if you can release your mics as well, that would be really useful. You can answer live, so I'll read them out and we can go through them. Or if you see a quick answer that you feel that you can type in, feel free to do that. Everybody can see them. So if I may, I'll kick off. Some of them are kind of easier than others, and some of them are interrelated. So we might kind of kick off a couple of things. So Vasilis Seferidis, I apologize if I've mispronounced that, and Joanne Chamberlain have sent two questions which are very similar. One is from Vasilis: what specific interventions are planned to support SME new suppliers, including UK-born companies? And related to that, potentially, Joanne Chamberlain has asked, Scott mentioned streamlining our R&D funding through Innovate UK, UKRI, and EPSRC. What are the challenges here, and by what routes do you see R&D funding competitions emerging in, and in what timescale? So they're interrelated potentially, but you can take them separately if you prefer.
Thanks, Andy. Two really good questions. So I think the honest answer is we don't yet have a sort of settled view on the specific interventions. I mentioned we have a broad intention to look to enhance UK capability wherever we can whilst pursuing this agenda. I think we will certainly look to build on the work that the 5G testbeds and trials program have already been successfully running, and certainly kind of the supplier directory that we have with UK 5G is a really useful tool. So I think the plan will be to spend the next few months thinking in more detail and engaging more widely with industry to understand, as I said, where we have particular strengths and capabilities and how we can look to build on that, and then where that fits with the kind of overall, with delivering the overall thing in terms of getting open and interoperable technologies deployed into the UK as quickly as possible. And then on Joanne's question, I think similarly, I mean, it's a perennial challenge of government and of the private sector to make sure that we join up as much as we possibly can between different pots of funding. I think the good news is that we have really good links with other parts of Whitehall, with Digital Catapult, with UKRI. I have a fairly sizable team that's being built up under me, which is partly about kind of making sure that we do that join up and sort of mitigate the risks that we aren't joined up as far as possible. But again, I think kind of sessions like this, organizations such as UK 5G do help us to kind of bring that join up, and we will certainly kind of be using these kind of networks to make sure that we kind of run competitions, or we sort of launch projects in the right way.
And maybe
sorry, and in terms of time, sorry, go on, Sam.
No, you go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say, in terms of timescales, the money that we have announced is available from the next SR, which is for starting in April. But as I said, I think we are going to be taking, whilst we want to move quickly, we are going to be taking the time to get to it. So it's not going to be a kind of immediate thing.
Yeah, and I mean, just to sort of put something practical there, if you're an SME that's got some technology to offer that fits in with these networks, we'd love to hear about it. Come and tell us about it. We're not the funding body for this, but we'd love to understand your capability, whether it's sort of nascent or more mature. And if it is more mature, we'd love to see what we can actually put through its paces within the Sonic environment. So do let us know what you have, and we'll include that in our planning.
And can I, as the host, can I do a shout out for KTN as well, who can support innovators and chat with innovators around their technologies, their platforms, their products and solutions. And Richard, who is ably managing the chat, will pop his email address in there and my email address, and we'll be happy to chat with you about developing your innovation roadmap in this specific sector. Thanks, guys. Can I move on to the next question? Great. Okay, so we've got a question from Dean Bubley. Question: the majority of 5G's new value and application come from use cases indoors for fixed wireless or on localized campuses. Almost all URLLC use will be indoors. The macro network is basically just delivering more of the same MBB. There are already multiple vendors for indoor FWA, private and campus 5G networks. Why is the diversification focused just on the macro network when that's not the main source of 5G benefit?
Well, let me say, I don't think the diversification strategy is focused only on the macro network. I think it's focused on networks generally. It's started by looking at the 5G domain particularly, and initial deployments of that are mostly upgrades to existing macro networks. So we need to think about that domain. But I think the general desire for open interoperability with a healthy and diverse supplier base spans all of these use cases. And I think it's right that there is a slightly different blend of suppliers when it comes to indoor and private networks. And we both want to make sure that sort of nascent market starts on the right foot with diverse suppliers and a secure approach to the infrastructure, but also it's a potential kind of crucible learning ground for suppliers and different architectures that will then help with the wider deployed network. So I think it's a point well made, and I think it's already very much part of what we're thinking about.
Can I just add to that, because I totally agree with Simon, but I think it is worth sort of stressing that this sort of comes from the underpinning of the telecoms supply chain review, which obviously looked in particular at our critical national infrastructure and where the risks around security and resilience lay. So I think we, as that concluded pretty clearly that the kind of most acute risks were in the radio access network for 5G. It's right, I think, that we focus on that first, because if that isn't fixed, then there's a kind of very major problem. But as Simon says, we have an ambition to look wherever the kind of risks lie and make sure that we have as diverse a market as we possibly can.
And just to reinforce it, so from the perspective of the Sonic platform, I think that those are some of the issues that we're exactly looking at additionally to the sort of national network perspective. So clearly there's going to be a prioritization in terms of the timing of what's being looked at, in priority order of where the risks lie. The Sonic Centre obviously is looking slightly forwards in terms of where these technologies might be adopted. So we're looking at those kinds of use cases and deployment models now, or we intend to.
Thank you. We've got a few questions around interoperability. Simon Rotman has asked, how do you classify interoperable if you have two software components which use SQL databases, but they use different implementations of SQL? So you need to write a translation table. Are the components interoperable or not?
It's a very, very good question. Very detailed. I suspect more detailed than we're going to get into in this session here. But certainly within the Sonic Centre, we will want to be developing essentially methodologies for establishing that and the sort of different levels of interoperability. And that's one of the reasons, that's one of its raison d'etres really, is you can see interoperability being claimed from a marketing brochure through to real nuts and bolts testing. And so it's actually really important to understand what interoperability really does mean and to actually have a framework and a methodology for that. But I'm not going to answer that specific question right here, right now, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question. It's easy to say open interoperable, or actually it isn't easy to say, it turns out. It's, the concepts of open and interoperability, are well embedded in the strategy in terms of an objective, but it's not enough, for example, for there just to be standards that specify interfaces and protocols. That there are plenty of those in telecoms already, and they haven't delivered the level of diversity that we're now aiming for, consistent with the strategy. So it goes beyond functionality. We also have to think about performance, because the most critical bits of the networks are the places where you need the greatest spectral efficiency and the greatest flexibility in moving services around. So, you have to go beyond that sort of functional level of interoperability into performance and manageability, where many of these interoperability initiatives have not succeeded in the past. So, we do need to take a broad sense view of it. And likewise, it isn't just focusing on sort of one particular element of the ecosystem. It's not just about the RAN. It's not just about specific standards for Open RAN. It's a much broader view than that.
Okay, thank you. And of course, there are opportunities for innovation in all of this as well, aren't there? So, if people are offering, creating software, platform solutions and products, there's a conversation around that as we go forward. Which I guess relates to a question from Simon Pike, further at the top of the list. It says, question from Simon Pike: mobile networks have had standardized interfaces from the beginning of GSM. However, the weakness of interoperability has always been operations and maintenance. Innovation in mobile technologies will lead to new capabilities, which will require their own proprietary support, including operations management. This may not be supported by third-party operations management and other suppliers. How do you balance the desires for interoperability and innovation?
Who wants to go? Do you want to go, Simon?
Well, let me have a go. So I mean, I think thanks for the question, Simon. As I alluded to just now in the previous answer, it is indeed management which has been a challenge in some of these initiatives in the past. I have some culpability there. I led a previous initiative on making small cells interoperate in an open fashion. And that delivered a wide range of functional standards that met the needs. But in the end, it was absolutely different vendors' approaches to managing that made the practical interoperability difficult. So we're very mindful of that challenge, and want to make sure this really is end-to-end, truly open interoperability.
And can I just add a point right there, I guess, as you look at increasingly, the inexorable sort of push of software to the edge of telecoms networks, and you look at what that means, it's going to change the market, right, in ways that we don't fully understand yet. And in a way, that's the reason to be able to understand and to maintain a very insightful, probably quite granular picture about what's going on, to make sure we do understand that trade-off between essentially possibly innovation and interfaces and interoperability. So I think that's part of the value that comes out of having this kind of level of insight from a platform like this.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got a whole bunch of questions, so we've got about 6 minutes left on the session. So if there's anything you'd really like to pick off, panelists, let me know. I'm going to find another question quickly. So a question from Vasilis Safidaris again. Although important, it's an interface question again. Although important, open interfaces would extend well beyond Open RAN and especially into the software components of the 5G system, which is itself based on software-defined networking architecture anyway. What are the plans on this direction? Is that something you can answer?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've already addressed that in the previous piece, that it isn't only about very specific Open RAN interfaces, though those are included. And likewise, I'd go, and I think there's another question on this, it isn't only about the 5G RAN, though as Scott's highlighted, that's a clear priority at this point in time. I do expect that we'll be looking at open networking in a range of other domains elsewhere in the mobile network and also in fixed networks over time.
Okay, we have another question from Gab Hincapi. Will there be a certification program as part of Sonic to give network operators an objective reference and increase their confidence when taking on new suppliers?
That's not something that we're planning to do. Certainly, we've got no plans to do that at this stage. It's a platform that's there to help facilitate, coordinate and understand what's going on and the challenges. It's not there to sort of give some certification. Certainly nothing that we've got in the plans at all at this point.
Okay, we've got a whole bunch of questions around diversification, obviously, in relation to a variety of different sets of equipment. So the first one is from an anonymous attendee. It says, is the scope of the diversification purely focused on terrestrial networks, or does it also include satellite and free space communications?
Sorry, I was busy typing an answer to someone. I think we are sort of guided a bit by our assessment of where the greatest risks are in terms of the kind of functions of the network. So as I said, we've done the telecom supply chain review that identified the primary risks around security and resilience and risks of national dependency in the access network for 5G. That's where we're focusing now. But as others have alluded, and as I said, I think we are mindful of the fact that networks are changing quickly, and we need to make sure that kind of there is resilience as far as possible across the networks. So it's a sort of non-answer, but we are kind of focusing on where the kind of greatest risks emerge and trying to sort of get ahead of them as far as we can.
Okay, thanks, Scott. And we've got a question from Saul, which is probably best directed at Joe. It says, will the results of the trials be shared publicly when using the new Sonic platform? And how will they be used to support the national infrastructure strategy?
So the models for all of that sort of thing have to be set up. So we're aiming to sort of open the full centre as it is in May. So we'll have plenty of discussions about that. We want to make things as transparent as possible. We're also conscious that we're working with commercial organisations who have, proprietary technology. So there is a clear sort of tension there to some degree. And so whilst we'll operate with the principle of transparency, we've yet to go through the details of what actually that means in practice and what sorts of results will come out of the centre and how we'll make them available. But essentially it's a cooperative endeavour. So yes.
Thanks, Joe. I've just clicked something and it's all gone bananas. Okay, we have a question from Dave H with a smile. So very friendly today, Dave. Thanks very much. What level of coordination will be in place with the EU as regards radio equipment directive? Will the UK competence at ETSI be expanded? And if so, how fast? We did a paper on this as part of the 5G testbeds program work for previously for DCMS, and now it seems that our recommendations here are being adopted, which is great. So it's more of a statement than anything else. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'll make a brief comment. It's probably more for Simon or Scott than me, but as somebody who's also worked in the radio equipment directive from my days in Ofcom, in fact, I would say that I think there is, to Scott's earlier point about standards being a very important area for us to be looking at. I think from the perspective of the UK more widely, we need to look at many ways in which our sort of voice is heard at the right levels and in the right ways, given we don't necessarily have economic might in the standards kinds of areas. And so I think a platform like Sonic and technical, whether it's from a research perspective or from national laboratories or from things like Sonic, interfaces into and the learnings into standards is really, really critical piece. And I see that as a real kind of one of the key chunks that we're going to be looking at with the Sonic platform playing our part in that space.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, I think Joe's absolutely spot on there. I mean, I would also say that the role of technical standards and indeed broader process and quality standards is critical here. I mean, Ofcom's had engagements in standards bodies since the very beginning. We have a wider range of duties coming to us, including, as announced this week, in keeping people safe online. And that involves a wider range of standards bodies, particularly more in the internet infrastructure domain. And indeed, when people are virtualizing mobile and fixed networks, that also invokes those sorts of standards. So we are in a conversation together with government counterparts on what role we play moving forwards in those tech standards.
Okay, we've got probably more questions than we have time, and we're now at the end of the session. I do apologise if we've not been able to answer your questions. We've been able to answer most of the questions, and there's a lot of repeat questions around innovation, diversification, Open RAN, and connectivity and devices and standards that we've already answered within that. So I do hope that we've kind of given you a flavour and a gist. We are looking to run further events in the new year around this with UK 5G, so there'll be other opportunities to join us. But I think at 11 o'clock we're coming to the end of the session. Can I thank you very much for joining us? We've had about 115, 116 people online today with us, and that's been extraordinary. It just remains for me to say goodbye and to invite the speakers to say goodbye as well. So if you celebrate Christmas, very, very happy Christmas to you, and we look forward to working with you in the new year. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.